Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love grounding like while we're doing this. So yes, definitely. I have my shoes off. I feel very comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. Even like when I sit, I'm like crisscross, like feet up in the air. That's my
Right.
comfortable.
Right. Exactly. If we could just like, go like, yeah, well, I think it's like this. And
Yep.
I'd be really down for that. I think that would be really good. That would work out for me.
Being
Oh
comfortable.
goodness.
Well,
Okay.
happy Sunday. Happy
Happy
Sunday for
Sunday.
anybody who's on here. And
Yeah,
for you
happy Father's
too.
Day for anybody who's celebrating.
Yes. Happy Father's Day.
Yeah. So I chose the subject today, but we had talked about like doing a different subject earlier. And I want to kind of touch on that subject, right? That we were going to
Yeah.
do like how do you show up for different relationships, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When there's challenges in those relationships. And then how do you know, like once you step away from someone, right? How
Uh-huh.
do you know? How do you know that they've changed? How do you know that they've
Ooh.
changed? Because like you don't really let people in a lot back,
Yeah.
right? Once you get to that point and you're like, oh, okay, I really need to make a boundary for myself so that I
Yeah.
feel safe and comfortable around you.
Yeah.
And I still want to express my love and I want to be around you, yet I have to limit like how I'm going to do that. And what does that look like?
Ooh, that's a really good question. That's a really
Right?
good conversation. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's true, right? It's like how do you know when somebody's changed, allowing them back in your life?
Right.
You know,
Right.
and I think a lot of us like want to when there is like some kind of like breakup, even with like a friendship or a family member, it's like
Mhm.
I think in your heart like you do want them back. Right.
I think that is a big thing. But the thing is that they have a role that they're already playing in a story that you've experienced.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that what happens is that in that experience, when they come forward and you start to hang out with them, anytime they do something that looks like old behavior,
Uh-huh.
and you're not really paying attention to the changed individual, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And they're
Yeah.
just
Oh, yes.
navigating a new aspect to their life because it's not the way that it used to be,
Well,
right?
with what you just said too, like I think that could be very challenging because I think in relationships, like I've experienced it for myself, like when you're in a long-term relationship, there is growth, but yet we decide to see the old behaviors or we decide to stick and just see that without even acknowledging like the growth or like everything else that is changing. And I think that could be like our downfalls because it's like we want this like thing and we constantly ask for it and it's like it's actually happening right before our eyes and we don't even see it.
Right. And so because like okay, so it takes a lot to get there.
Uh-huh.
And it's usually conditioning. And it's usually when we're coming from a place where we have had perceived hardships. Whether they are or not makes absolutely no difference. They're perceived. So we're perceiving this, right?
Uh-huh.
And we're translating it to be or mean a lot of different things, right?
Um
Okay. I'm starting to share us. So hold on.
there's like
I'll come back right now.
what happened?
I was starting to share us on Facebook, but I'll come back right now. So
Okay.
what I mean is like what I mean is like, well, we usually take a couple of minutes, like while we're talking and everything in the beginning. And so I'm usually really low pro about it, but I don't have my phone with me. So I can usually do it on my phone, like while we're talking. Now I'm having to switch
Oh, like
tabs on the
multitask.
computer and I don't know where my phone is. Otherwise I would just go grab it and I don't want to be long. So,
That's
all
okay.
right, back to it.
That's okay. Yeah, so relationships. Well, how do you get to the point where you see the growth in this other individual?
Well, the thing is that this is what I've noticed is that people will look at growth as changed behavior. Okay. And
Okay.
so changed behavior is an energetic. And I don't think that people understand that it's an energetic. There is an action that goes
Uh-huh.
with behavior, but it is an energetic. So it is driven by thought and feeling.
Okay.
All right.
So then
And
so then it goes beyond action then.
it
Because
does.
I think in these spaces it could be very kind of in the space of, okay, like, you know, they've changed when they show actions, but it's not about the actions, it's about the energy.
It's about the actions, because like a lot of time, actions, energy, behavior, behavior is naturally an action oriented concept. All right.
Okay.
Anytime there's going to be action, there's going to be animation, and animation is energy. And that energy is going to be what drives you into that action or behavior, right?
Okay.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
it's a very subtle energy. What I found with addiction is that it is spiritual bankruptcy. You're
Mm.
spiritually bankrupt. Okay.
Yeah.
And in that, you're trying to fill something, okay, a
Mm-hmm.
hole that is there. And until you understand that you are what you're looking for,
Yeah.
it doesn't come together.
Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
agree. Like, I also believe it's like spiritual bankruptcy. I also believe that at some point there might be like, and I don't know if it's the same thing, like some pain, right? Or some
Pain's a great
type of
motivator, I think.
like experience that now you're trying to numb when you are sober.
Yes. Well, you're trying to do like a lot, you know? You're
Uh-huh.
trying to do multiple things. You're trying to hide what you perceive as dirty, okay, or
Mm-hmm.
nasty, or I shouldn't do this, or there's shame behind it, or anything like that, right? And then
Uh-huh.
what happens is that you start to create like an offset, like a separate life practically, to where like you'll hide it for a little while, or you'll find people that are just like you so that you feel comfortable while you practice what it is that you know is detrimental to you. And that's what OCD is. OCD is like obsession. You're obsessed with something, all
Uh-huh.
right? And even though you know it could be detrimental to you, you're compelled to do it anyway. And you're looking for a different result. So it's like the very definition of insanity, to where you just keep turning into over and over. But that's usually because you don't have any other conditioning. There's no other tools, and that's how you arrive there.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have any other tools, right? Like that's
Yeah,
at some
because
point
like
that's all
that's
you
what you
know.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's what you know. So that
What
that
about
right there.
like because I know somebody who's going through it now, like an extension of a person, not extension of a person, but
Okay.
just I know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody type of situation.
Oh, I got you, girl.
And like,
Right.
what do
A
you
friend
do
of a
when like
friend. Somebody told me. Somebody told me.
yeah. And it's like, what about when people aren't ready to arrive there, right? To arrive to like getting better or to heal or to find the tools. Like,
Oh.
what can we do as like loved ones to meet them where they're at?
Um, okay, so for me, I think that okay, so like what I understand is this, right? Is that for for me, how it worked, right, was
Uh-huh.
that I had a desire to be known. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
still have a desire to be known by all of the people that were directly affected, that are like the crunch, right? My family, because that's where
Uh-huh.
I'll fall back into a role. And it was only recently that I found out that that's what I was doing, because there's mom, right? And then there's my
Yes.
version and everybody else's version. So whatever their version is that they lived with me, every time they come back to me, that's the last picture that they have of me. And that's what's embedded, right? That's what's embedded in their cells. Okay. So depending on whether or not they have done any inner work, okay, my
Mm-hmm.
behavior will trigger certain things that happen for them that they felt safe in, because like I stopped completely, right? and
Uh-huh.
then and then I went ahead and I didn't. Okay. And so that will, it's like it's like when
Yeah.
somebody's super deep in an addiction, right? And they make those promises.
Yeah.
Right? I made so many promises, it was ridiculous. And so trust
Oh,
is a big thing, right? And so
yeah.
that trust was like where I learned that maybe I could, you know, be better, but I didn't trust myself, you know? And that's the thing, is that you don't trust yourself to be enough. You're not enough. You're trying to fill a hole that's there
Yeah.
that tells you that you're unlovable.
Yes. Yeah. Or
So,
like, yeah. So then even when a person is in this stage of like healing and finding these tools,
okay.
it's kind of like starting from a new foundation, right? Of like the trust and the being accountable and like making sure they follow through with like the commitment or whatever they promised to like their loved ones. Like I'm
Oh yeah.
assuming. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely that. But the thing is that it's also the trust is like one of the biggest things, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And sometimes it's not only the trust, it's that it shakes the very foundation of the conditioning that's been laid down. Because at one point it could be okay. And then all of a sudden it's not. And that's usually what happens. It isn't like it happens overnight.
Yeah.
And this is like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
like this is a build up to, right? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
and it's usually over layers and layers and layers of
Stuff,
things that, yeah, stuff. Oh, stuff.
as the
I
title
meant
is.
stuff, right? Well, like,
Yeah.
okay, so for you, you have you have a background story that would allow you to cultivate separation. And when I was growing up, that's what they were cultivating a lot of. Right now, we're starting to cultivate uh, consciousness, to where a higher
Mhm.
consciousness, to where we're trying to bring people together and
Mhm.
discard separation. That's where we're at right now, and it's going to be a lot of work. All right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was taught a lot of separation, like, no, 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 this is how this works. Okay. So
Yeah.
when you see that addiction hits every family, it has no discrimination, none whatsoever. There's no discrimination. You could
Yeah.
be really, really rich. You could be really, really happy. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's going to settle on or into what your experience is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that comes from behaviors. That comes from behaviors and habits and patterns that you've lived and that you have participated in.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable and okay at that moment, right? They're comfortable and
Yeah.
okay at that moment. Like, it's not a big deal to go and have drinks with friends. It's not a big deal to go and have drinks with friends. That's perfectly fine. And
Yeah.
it's okay to have a beverage by yourself. That's perfectly fine.
But then it comes with the intention, right? Like at some point when you're doing
Yes.
it to numb, or you're doing to like suppress, or you're doing it to get like that hit of a high, like I feel like that's when it becomes dangerous. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
sometimes like you're not even aware of it. There's so many times where I remember drinking to suppress, but I remember thinking like this could be very easy for me to do like every day.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think because I knew as a very young kid that I came from a family of addiction, I was
Okay.
always trying to be very mindful of like the intake, or like in high school, right? Like I remember ecstasy being, and I really wanted to try it, but because I knew it was okay, like don't do it, like because I don't know if I'm gonna like it, or I don't
Oh.
know if I'm gonna like be gravitated to it. And I don't know if that's how ecstasy works, but I think being a teenager, it was like a fear.
Right. Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, yeah, so everything works that way, though. Everything works that way. If we like something, we'll obsess over it and we'll keep doing it. And if we make it
Yeah.
detrimental and we continue, then our behavior becomes compelling. And then that's when we go into that trying to save that cycle and keep doing
Yeah.
what we're doing, but we're getting that same result. So we're in that cycle of insanity at that moment.
And it can be like also to express it more, like addiction, not just with drugs, right? Like it could be with like work, sugar, or are we just talking about like drug addiction?
Oh no, it's everything,
Right.
because
Yeah.
I see my behaviors manifest in a variety of ways. And I can tell when I'm self-soothing and I've fallen back into coping skills right? Because that's what they are. They're coping skills. Coping skills are necessary, yet
Yeah.
they're not they're a crutch.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
they're a crutch. They are to help you heal, to get you to where you need to be, and then you got to stand up. All
Yeah.
right. So
You know,
coping.
so
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, like, talking about that with the intention and stuff. Like, I had this experience, you know, right? Like, my heart was like broken a couple weeks ago, and I had a couple of friends offer, like, "Hey, let's go out to drink, let's go dancing, let's just forget about it." And every time it was like, "No, like, not this time around. Like, we'll get to that, but not when I'm like feeling my feelings." You know, for
Exactly.
the same reason that I don't want it to be like a crutch or for it to be a consistent thing. And then at some point, I want to feel my feelings, and I'm not going to be able to get there.
Right. Right. Recently I went through something like that, and I was just like, "Oh, okay." And so I did some self inventory stuff, right? And when I found out why I was practicing my coping skills, my creature comfort coping skills, right?
Creature
Which is
comfort.
like gaming on online, right? Gaming with my phone, all right? And not where you make money. Not
Okay.
where you make money. Just
No,
where you
that's a good
pay
thing, because that
money.
would probably be a lot
Where
more
you
addicting
pay
if you did
money.
make money.
Where you pay money, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I was doing that. And then I was also eating my Cheez Its. And when I have like a bag or a box of Cheez Its and I'm just eating that and I'm not eating a lot of other stuff, I know that I'm internal in that moment. I know I'm internal. I'm doing something's going on. Yeah. And then I
Good
can see
awareness,
like
though.
other things ramp up. Yeah. I can see other things ramp up. And when they do, I'm like, oh. And so recently I went through a shift, right? And I didn't know what it was. So I looked and looked and looked. And it turned out that I was just missing my daughter really deeply, right?
Aw.
And so, yes, but I didn't want to. But the thing is that I associate that feeling with sadness, and I don't want to associate sadness with her. And so
Okay.
that's why we resist, because we don't want to associate those, what we perceive as detrimental or bad, or we don't want those feelings, right? We
Yeah.
associate those feelings and we try to, that's what we're trying to push out. That's what
Yeah.
we're trying to numb. That's what we're trying to escape. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I allowed that to come in and be what it was, and I did microdosing so that way I could really get to the hub of it, because my behavior had gone so far into my old pattern, all right,
Yeah.
that I was mortified that I could self-sabotage myself at this point in the game to that degree, right?
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, now why am I doing that? And so I went ahead and I did some microdose, and I went, oh, okay, great. There was some residual from my dad that I processed. There was some residual from
I love that.
a relationship with Jack that I processed, but I couldn't get there until I understood that I was creating abandonment in my life through a story again. And it was unnecessary, but it's such a familiar, that's my core trauma, is abandonment. So when I look at things, I look at it through like that and that lens,
Yeah.
right?
I feel
And
you.
then
Yeah.
right. And then I went ahead and I went to a sound bath. So it's like a self-care sort
Oh,
of
that's awesome.
aspect, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
once you can get to that place where you can really see what it is and move into that acceptance, then all of a sudden you don't need the coping skills anymore, because you're becoming who you are. You're allowing yourself to become who you are. And it's cool.
Oh,
It's
hey,
really,
me. That's awesome.
yes. Oh, okay. Yes. Anytime. That would be lovely. We would love it. Okay. So for today with addiction, we're also talking about how it affects the roles that family members take, right? And
Yes.
how difficult it
Yeah.
is to be able to come back from excuse me. Okay.
Hmm.
To come back from well, it's easier that way.
No, yes. Go for it.
It's easier. Okay, so it's easier to come back once you have tools that are in a different direction, right? And
Yeah.
I will always go back to tools that I know are maybe not the healthiest for me, right?
Yeah. Going
It
back to
does.
like the old behaviors.
Yes, right? Because
Yeah.
because it's well, it's not old thinking. It is the same thinking. And it's the same thinking that you're
Mm.
going to use in the future. So you have to understand how it works for you.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're in those cycles and you've built that conditioning, understanding how it works for you is key. Because until I understood that I was spiritually bankrupt, there wasn't anything for me to do. There wasn't anything to change. I had no goal orientation, so to speak, as to what
Well,
it was I wanted to shift.
well, I
Right?
think that's like a big thing to like also share is that sometimes we think that we have to do something about it, right? Or like we have to have the answers or like the next steps. And I think a lot of it is just simply sitting with it and being aware of what arises,
Oh,
right? Because it's
your
like, do
original
we,
question. I'm sorry for interrupting. Your original question was, what could you do as family members when you're in that situation, right?
yeah,
Okay,
like
so
how can you support them?
here's what I learned, okay? But do you see what I just did? Like I went into a big old thing and shit like that. That's exactly what addicts do. They make it about themselves all over again because they're gonna do that
I
and bring it in like that. Fuck yeah.
I love it.
It's just like that. No, it's just like that.
I'm like,
So when you're asking what you can do as a family member, be you. Be the most you that you can be, right? And judge the situation according to your safety. How safe do you feel? How safe do you feel in the circumstances with this person who's practicing their addiction? Okay,
yeah,
it doesn't mean that you are practicing their addiction, but you will come up with constructs so that you don't have to get involved. That is part of this conditioning. Okay.
okay,
And so
yeah,
what happens is that you'll automatically take a roll on. You will see that this individual isn't doing something. You know that it's something that needs to happen because you've been conditioned to think that that's what needs to take place. All right. You will
yeah,
automatically pick up that role. Okay. Depending on how many other individuals are involved in this one addict's behavior.
okay,
So
okay,
let's say there's 7 or 8 people in the house. All right.
yeah,
This one addict's behavior is going to recreate a family situation of
yeah,
some sort to where, like, there's a mom, a dad, and then there's brothers and sisters, or however that's going to work. And they're going to create it because they're in a delusion. Okay.
okay,
And
yeah,
the delusion is I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Everything outside of me is fucked up. If
yeah,
all that would just be okay, I'd be okay. All
yeah,
right. So, what you can do as someone who's not participating in an addiction in that way,
uh-huh,
right? You're not the addict in that moment, right? You can ask yourself a lot of questions.
uh-huh,
Does this require a response? That's the biggest question. Does this require a response? Because when somebody's talking to you and I call it under the weather because that's the nicest phrase that I can come up with, right? They're just under
uh-huh,
the weather. They're not present.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
not present. And so
yeah,
anything that I'm talking to them about or anything I'm engaging with them about, it's going to be wrapped up in whatever the substance is that they are
yeah,
using as a therapeutic value for themselves to not feel.
okay, okay,
Okay. So if I try to insert myself between that, I'm only becoming a sandwich,
mm-hmm,
something for them to digest in however they want. And that isn't what I want. So
yeah,
when I ask myself that question, does this require a response? Okay. All right. Then I
yeah,
know that I'm good. Okay.
uh-huh,
And and a lot of times removing yourself from the situation is what's necessary. I'll tell you what I tell other people, like when I'm talking to people and they have addiction in their family, and this is rough. Okay. This is super rough, but it wasn't until this happened for me
uh-huh,
that everything got better. All right. Is
okay,
that when you're holding somebody like this and you're preventing them from hitting their bottom, you're
yeah,
not helping them. You're not helping them. So go like this.
Yep. Yeah.
Go like this.
One of the things that I told this person was, like sometimes you have to hit rock bottom and we can't prevent them to hit rock bottom because sometimes the greatest lessons come there. But one of the things that I also mentioned is like,
Well,
just pray for them. Pray that like their rock bottom may be gentle, that it may be like very loving, that
it's
they
usually a
know.
crash and burn. It usually has to be a crash and burn because you're going through. So let's say somebody has a shopping addiction. And they just keep getting credit cards and credit cards and credit cards, and everything's going great and great and great. First, they start out small because they have like 4 or 5 credit cards. So they put a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a couple of charge accounts because their credit looks really good. Now they're going ahead and they're shopping at
Victoria's Secret.
Balenciaga. Right? Now they're somewhere, okay? And now they're somewhere, all right? So they've been using, okay, that to fulfill them, all right? And now they are living externally rather than internally, all right? Even if they're putting it on, they're living externally, right? Okay, and so like, what are we going to do about that? Like, we like the gifts that they give to us. We like those things that they like include us in. We love when they take us shopping with them, but we know hands down that they are not doing well financially. And this is all a facade.
Because I think at some point it's like, as people are being around people with like addiction, it's like at some point I feel like you do have to step back because it does become very selfish, and I think even in a way where you want to help them, it's like we can't play God either. Like we can't play that like we know what's like the right thing, because it's
not
like you
for
never
them.
know. Like
Not
I
for
always
them.
feel because
Not
for me
them.
like,
This
and I
is
know
their experience.
exactly, and I know some people won't like what I'm about to say maybe, but it's like sometimes those journeys are there for its own purpose, and like we think like our ego mind have like this judgment that it's bad, and it makes sense, right? Like there's worry, there's fear, but at the same time it's like I feel like when you have like this connection or when you have like this faith, you can lean onto it and just be like, okay, I'm gonna step back and let the universe do its thing, because obviously it knows what it's doing. It's like there's so many people who've like gone through certain journeys and they've came out of it with so much more wisdom and so much more like unconditional love and just so much more of this like thing, and they share it to the world, and it's like they wouldn't have been there if it weren't for that itself. Like one of the girls that I follow, her name's Gabby Bernstein, right? And she had an addiction in her early 20s.
Right.
And she talks about how like one night like she was at home and she just got down on her knees and started praying, like she was done, like she was tired, and she heard this voice saying like, get clean and you'll live a life of like over like your wildest dreams or something. And she cleaned up, and now she's like teaching the world like this connection with the universe and like love and all this stuff, and for her it's like, yeah, it's part of the journey.
Exactly.
But again, a lot of people won't like hearing that, right?
Well, we have to. So like while you were explaining her story, right? So she hit this place called surrender.
Yes.
All right. And you have to surrender. You have to surrender to win. And that is that's what your bottom is all about, is surrendering to yourself and saying, oh, this is who I am. Oh, this is who I am right now. Do I want this? Am I okay? I understand. Okay, but do I want to stay here? Yes. And that is the heart right there. That's the heart right there. Is if you can surrender to like what is, and you can put it into perspective to where, yes, then you have hit your bottom and you're ready to roll. And that's just your bottom in that circumstance.
Say it again.
That's just your bottom in that circumstance. Some of it can be very life-changing, paradigm-changing, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know if I told you, like, I'm writing a book, right?
Oh!
And there's a chapter in my book that talks about, like, rock bottom being a great source of light.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally believe that. I know. And the thing is that you get several you get several opportunities to allow your bottom to be whatever it could be. So
Yeah.
your first bottom might be getting pulled over for a DUI. All right, that was mine. Okay.
Mine too.
But I didn't stop. I didn't stop because the cop was my problem.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And my at that time partner was my problem. All
Okay.
right. But I
Yeah.
wasn't looking at any of my addictive patterns or anything like that. So naturally, I escalated because I thought I was untouchable.
Okay.
And in that, I created so much. But each time I would get, like little
Yeah.
hints, like, hey, you could stop now and it'd be all right. Hey, you could
Yes.
stop now and it'd be all right. And I
Yes.
got
Yeah.
into like a really a bad relationship for 7 years. And in that 7 year relationship, I was so deep in my addiction. I was drinking so much and I was using whatever I could because it was so abusive. And it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't good. It just wasn't good. And so,
Yeah.
and that right there, that wasn't my bottom. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
even that was my bottom. That was my
Yeah.
problem. Those are my problems. They are all external. They are not me. I'm not causing this. It's happening to me.
Yeah.
It's a story. So depending on how you're telling the story to yourself, right? So if you're in, okay, great. If you're in a situation where addiction is with a loved one of any style or shape, first you have to find out if you're safe,
Mm.
and then you check if you're comfortable. All right.
Mm.
And then you decide if you would really like to have a conversation with them. Okay.
Yeah.
And you decide what it is that you want to talk about. All right. If they are demanding of your time, all right, you decide how you want to show up and you be
Mm.
you. Just be you, but
Yeah.
stay the observer.
Yes.
What you're
Yeah.
just watching a movie.
Yeah.
You're just watching a movie play out. You don't have anything to do with it. You did not cause it. You're not the
Yeah.
reason they're making their choices. They are making their own choices. So
Yeah.
understanding that, really understanding that.
One of the things that I want to add to that, because I just read a book and it helped me so much navigate like my mom and my dad, and it talks about like being the observer, right? And it talks about how when we get emotionally attached.
That's our neuroplasticity. That's how our brain rewires. So if you can, if you can't, because like we have self and we're with self and we don't do that. We don't observe self the way that we could. But if we
Yeah.
did, here's what it would look like. We would be the person looking on the outside, but that would be in relationship to self. Then if we were to observe our relationship to self, that would be the first part of the observer. But then we would observe the observer observing the self. All right. And when you get five out, there is not detachment, there is understanding.
I like that
Okay.
understanding.
Exactly. Because what you're doing is each time you're removing more of the investment of energy that you have in the subject. Okay. And you're
Yeah.
allowing yourself to be restored so that you're not creating the hole from the
Yeah.
conditioning you're living.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yes.
huge. It's
It
so
is, because
huge.
it's life changing, because it's like, yeah, when you do become the observer, it doesn't take you on an emotional roller coaster anymore.
No. Well, it
Right?
can't
Like
because
one of
you've
the things,
processed who you are. You've
well,
processed who
one of
you
the,
are. You're making a decision to stand in who you are. So
yeah.
your brain mapping changes in both spaces. You create
Yeah.
different canals. So in neuroscience, all right, there's Annette Pren, and she is top of her field, really good. She has a free course on Udemy about that. But that's how I learned. Yeah, that's how I learned about the neuroplasticity and all of that. To see, I wanted to know how I was wired, and it showed me.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask a question, right? Like, what do you do, let's say, if you're the one that has come through and now you have like the tools and you're not in that space anymore? Because I know you mentioned something similar earlier. Like, what do you do when like the people around you still perceive you as the person that still has the addiction going on. And you know in your core, like, that's no longer who I am. And people either resist it, they don't believe you, or they're having a hard time to come around and see your growth. Like,
Oh
what do you
yeah.
do when you're like that person? Because I can imagine it being this like desperate feeling of like, but can't you see me? Like, I did all this work, you
Right.
know?
Well, here's what it is. Here's what it is. It is allowing the people who see behavior that you have, okay, or perform or act in, all right? It allows you to see the depth of trigger that they have in your
Mm,
actions, but it also, like, this opened up, it opened up a conversation for me and my daughter, and in that conversation she was able to convey to me how she feels when I'm in that behavior, and how it's different now. And she's trying to, I can see her trying to assimilate the change. Like, she
okay.
tells me that it is reflective of how something was, because that's where it takes her. It takes her
Yeah.
to that space. That's it.
Yes.
It just takes her to that space of a place where it isn't beautiful at all, not in
Yeah.
any way,
Yeah.
shape, or form.
Okay.
And just me not being present for her at all,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
so, and when she tells me that, I have lots of opportunities, okay? I can, like, at first, if it would have been like, a year ago, right? I probably would have went, "Oh, look what I did. I was such a bad mom," blah, and everything like that, okay? And
Um,
this time, because I have processed that, and I've taken the time to love myself self and understand my choices, where they came from, and then change, right?
yeah.
Change. Because change is better than an apology. Change is always better
Oh,
than an
yeah.
apology, right? And so just changing, okay? But because my daughter and I have been so close, like, during this whole time, right? It's difficult for
Yeah.
her to see the how my behavior now is different than how it was when I'm doing something that was. Okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is, because we usually have like really open discussions, like super open. And I'm really grateful for that. And
That's
now we're going into a depth of intimacy that we hadn't known was possible. And it's very
okay.
fragile, very fragile. So when
Yeah.
she was conveying to me what happens for her when I choose certain things, okay,
Yeah.
I didn't feel compelled to say, I did explain to her, all right? And the
Uh-huh.
only reason I did was because I needed to. That was what I needed to do. She needed to explain to me, then I needed to explain to her. And so we both
Yeah.
heard each other, and that was really beautiful. Plus, I was able to really recognize that this is how she feels, and that
Yeah.
that's how she feels. But that's how she feels. That's
Yeah.
how she feels. That's how she feels. Do you see what I mean? Did you feel
Yes.
the pull? Okay, because I pulled my energy back from having to anything.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not
even in those
having to
spaces,
do
right?
anything
Like,
in that.
super sweet, like, for you to be there the way that you are showing up, because I think it's easy for people in any kind of situation to very quick and try to like justify, right? Or very quick, and not because they're trying to express out of their own voice, but just trying to make themselves feel better,
Well,
right?
not
Because
only make themselves feel better because they're uncomfortable, but they're in a
yeah,
place of powerlessness,
yeah,
and they have nothing whatso fucking ever to say or do in their control whatso fucking ever for that other person. And that
yeah,
other person is in that space, and just honoring that they're in that space. And
yeah,
I'm going to feel a certain way about it, but I can also
definitely,
recognize that that's going to be a trigger. So I
yeah,
can, since I've been doing that work, right? And I
yes,
know that my
yeah,
core is abandonment. I can see how I'm creating abandonment by the story I'm telling. And I was like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Here's my habit. Here's
Yeah.
my habit. I'm practicing abandonment again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I practice separation. So when she expressed that to me, and then I was able to express to her, at first she was, trying to let me know that, like, no, that's not what. And I said, I understand. I want you to understand that I hear you. And
Right.
we're just sharing right now. And so I'll
Yeah.
tell you something. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so, all right. Because like,
Yeah.
that's how we have
And
to
it's
learn to structure our intimate,
yeah.
because it's fragile. We're feeling a shit ton when we're talking to one another. And
Because
and
even in those spaces, right? Like it
I'm
feels like
such a better person now to know. That's what we were laughing about. And she goes, yes. And I said, yes, I'm such a better person now. And so
yeah,
she was asking me questions about, like, well, how do you, just like, it was really beautiful how she was able to just tell me where she was at. And then we just held space for that. That was
that's
super
sweet.
important.
That's sweet.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I was one of my best memories in my whole life right now. Okay.
Uh,
So far is the day that she got her wedding dress. That's one of the
aw.
best memories in my whole life. And the reason why, and she had already gone with other people to look at wedding dresses. I didn't know that though. And
Oh,
so, because like, I thought she would just go with her mom, because that's how I thought at that
yeah.
time. I don't think that way anymore. I don't think like I get it now. Anyway, we went to Briardale, and I remember listening to her in the background in the changing room, and it started going like this. Ooh, oh, whoa, yes. And I go,
Oh,
oh, she found the dress. And I could feel all of it, the hopes, the dreams, everything. I could feel all of
oh,
it. She came out, she looked beautiful. All right. My old behavior, my old pattern would have been to say, well, we can't afford that right now, but we will put payments. Okay. And then you could go ahead and get it. And because I have been practicing contrary action, okay? Because that's what you need to do when you're in an obsessive compulsive behavioral pattern. You need to do contrary action. So if you're doing something that's detrimental, it's not just don't do that. It's do something that is exactly opposite of that.
yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. And know that you are inserting distortion, and it's not going to be pleasant, and it's okay.
Yeah. It's so funny because the other day, like, I had this like conversation, and it was triggering a lot of feelings, right? Like it was a heated conversation, and I'm trying to practice to just be with my feelings, and I could feel like my old reaction wanting to like walk away and wanting to not deal with it and just being like crap, like okay, here's this, whatever, right? And instead I'm like, no, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna feel. And tears started rolling down, and I was like, okay, like this is it, like this is the new behavior that I want to move forward with my life, not the reaction, right? And it was different and it was new, but again, it's like totally the opposite of what I would have done, and
Exactly.
totally new, yeah. And
Exactly.
again, right,
And
because
that
I have the
that
same,
is how you change patterns,
and I have
contrary
this,
behavior.
I have like the same core like belief of like the abandonment wound, right? And I was noticing how for me it's like, oh, in those spaces I don't allow myself to be because I am afraid that I'm going to show tears or more feelings and they're going to abandon me. I was like, the other way it's easier because it's like, well, I'm walking away. I'm not even giving you the choice to abandon me.
That's right. That's it right there. That is it right there.
Yeah.
So that is like, we have, you and I, our cores are the same. I understand
Yeah.
that. I understand that so
It's like
completely.
I'm going to walk away before you even abandon me.
Right?
You don't
Right.
have the
We could
choice.
call it the abandonment show and not show up. That'd be fucking great.
Yeah.
So okay, so anyway, my old behavior would have been to not get it, right? So we walk over there and we're choosing it and everything. And I do contrary behavior. I say, let's get it. And Brianna almost fell over. She almost fell over,
Oh,
but it was so beautiful to
that's
see
awesome.
her watch me just do what I told her I would do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was a big change. And that was
Oh,
years into me not practicing my addiction. Years. We're
oh,
talking, God, yeah, we're talking about 8 years into my addiction not being clean, right? And having
okay.
good, 8 to 10 years.
Okay. Okay.
Crazy
Yeah.
stuff. But I was
So
like,
even so it's like
I
even in
was
those
so
spaces, right?
mean. What's up?
Like it's like even in those spaces, right? Like whoever is going through like some kind of addiction, it's like give yourself grace because it takes time. It is just like how you said how addiction doesn't happen overnight. Like
Right.
it starts off as like here and there. Like same thing it feels like when you're trying to change your behaviors or when you're trying to rewire your brain. It doesn't
Mhm.
happen overnight. It's like
Well, it's a
consistent
paradigm shift.
practice.
It's a paradigm shift. What I
Yeah.
found works is that if I'm using a substance and I write a letter to it and I tell it how good it treated me for so long and how this is
Yeah.
this and thank you very much for being my best friend. Why did you turn on me, motherfucker? Okay.
Fuck you. With a
And this
lot of
is what
why.
happened. And this is we're breaking up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Like
helps me. That
it
helps
does.
me because then I can put it in perspective because it's not a person except
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah.
And so, like, I can break up with a substance anytime. That is not a problem. But then I'm still wherever I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the letter part because I've done the same thing.
Yes.
Like I
It
just did
works.
one with like my wall the other day with this whole reaction thing where like I walk away. I just did a letter with it where I was like, "Hey," and it was so sweet because what came out of it, it wasn't something that I kind of like thought of before. Like I wrote a letter and I was like, "Hey, you know what? Like I knew why you were here. Like you were here to protect me. Like you were here to protect me from the people that like didn't allow emotion to be here." And as I wrote, I was like, "You're no longer invited. Like you don't no longer belong here because the people that I'm surrounding myself with, like I don't need to protect myself." And it was so sweet. Like it literally brought me to tears. And again, because I was just writing, you know, and it became more of an affirmation of like, oh yeah, like now that I'm an adult, I get to choose who I want to share like my vulnerability to, and I know they won't abandon me. Like I know
Right.
there's no rejection. And it was
Right.
so sweet, like so sweet.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that because, like, we're using different language, right?
yeah,
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 and so, like, I like that a lot better. You wanna know why? Because then that is a better integration of acceptance, so you're surrendering into an acceptance of you, and
yeah,
you know what?
yeah.
So if you take that a little further, right, and you
Uh-huh.
address the child that it is that wants to walk away, right,
Okay.
then that
Yeah.
child from where they feel or know that they're abandoned, right,
Uh-huh.
will start to understand that they have more perception, and then that and
Oh,
then you're integrating them into who you are. And that
okay.
is because that's who you are. That's who shows
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
But I really love that. Yes, that's exactly what I'm
Yeah.
gonna be given as homework now.
Yeah.
I want you to
Yeah.
write a love letter.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that takes it into a whole different alley.
And share it with us too, right? Because I'd love to hear those letters.
Yeah, I'm gonna have people share them. I think
Yeah.
that'll be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're starting shamanism, so it's a good way to get you have to be in who you are. So
Yeah.
that'll be good.
What are you doing the shamanism? Are there classes?
Yeah, I'm going to do the attunements, the rites, and
Okay.
then we'll do studying and we'll move a lot of energy.
Okay.
I'll teach in a way to where we'll move energy an awful lot so that people understand that that's like
Okay.
what we can do. So yeah.
When are you teaching it? I'm like, I'm
Wednesday
interested. Do you want
nights.
to sign me up?
Oh, Wednesday nights. You want me to tell you? At 7.
Yeah, Wednesday nights.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Wednesday nights at 7. Yeah, it's really good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
good. It's going to start on this Wednesday. We'll start the shamanism. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Okay. This Wednesday.
All right.
Okay.
And
So I'm
then I
gonna
can
come.
go ahead and send you a message as to what you bring and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Send it to me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
I'll be there.
Yay.
Yeah.
I love you, Noriga.
Immediately I'm like, oh, shamanism. Yes. I
Yeah,
wanna-
well, mostly what it is that okay. So I just want to be really clear with you. Okay, so
uh-huh.
for me, I really encourage everybody getting in touch with their own roots, their own cultural roots. Okay. That's where it has to come from, because that's how you're going to really connect to the earth.
Okay.
So whatever your culture is, I encourage you to start looking into things that resonate with you. If remedies work for you, or if, but things that are connected to the earth. All right.
Okay. Okay.
And then that way you're in alignment with who you are, and you're the earth steward of that land, right? And then you
Okay.
start to, yes, you start to treat it sacred. There's like a lot behind it, because
Okay.
like each of us has a place. Each of us has a place on the earth, right? And each of us is a steward of that earth aspect. We're only here borrowing the planet.
Yeah.
We're only here
Yeah.
borrowing the planet for about 100 years.
Yeah. 100 years. I
Right?
have a lot of homework. I was just
And it's
talking
so
to
important.
I just talked to one of my friends about how I felt disconnected with my culture. So I'm like, oh, I had to go do some homework.
That's right. That's right. It's very necessary, because what's going to happen, all right, what seems that it's going to happen is that we're going to have a very upper echelon of haves and a very lower echelon of have-nots. And the have-nots will have to be of service to the haves in to such a degree that it will appear as slavery like it does now, right? But the disparity will be even greater. In that, we will create community here, all right, because this isn't very big. And so as we create community here, we're going to go back to our roots more and more, because we will know that this right here is a facade, that this isn't really what we're aiming for. So really getting into your culture, understanding how you are connected to the earth, looking for traditions, stories, things like that of your people.
Okay.
Really,
Yeah, that could be
really,
good.
yes, really important, because that allows you that connection. And it's almost as if you're standing like a pillar in that moment as energy connected to the earth. And you're a representation of that
I like
culture
that.
and connection, no matter where you go. So you're taking that little bit of earth bit that you are, that earth magic, that stardust. All right. Because this is where you come from. This
I
is
like
the
that.
clay you're built out of. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it
So
is.
when you
Yeah.
go back to the clay that you're built out of, all right, then you begin to understand and resonate with the earth. And so that's what we're practicing. You like that?
Okay. I do. I really, really do. I could feel like the conviction in my being, like, yes, I want to do that. I
That's
really
cool.
do.
That's cool. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited. And it can be a drop-in class, but we're doing the rites, and the rites will probably take, I'm looking at it for about 3 months, I think would be a good amount. So we're looking at maybe, or 4 months, so maybe 16 weeks, something like that. And we're going to go and we'll practice. So, all right. So Wednesday we're doing all of the rites all at once, and then we'll start practicing them on one another. So that way we learn to pass them. Yeah, because that's what most of the life force energy modalities are, is passing on the gift. That's what you're doing. You're passing on the gift of spirituality. This is spirituality. Here you go.
Yeah.
So it's really good. It's super connected.
Okay. It sounds really connecting.
I really love you.
Oh, I love you too. Oh my God. Okay. Sounds good.
All right. This is a great talk. Thank you for giving me a platform today, because I really needed to process. I needed to process that. And that was just like, I have a lot of feelings with regard to seeing that, firsthand when I look at my shit. And then when I can step out of my shit and then look at my shit, I'm like, oh yeah, that's some shit, but you've already done that shit. And it's okay for you to have a charge over it. It's okay for you to feel bad. It's okay for you to feel bad about being a dick.
It means you're human.
That's right action. That's right action. You're learning. You're learning.
Yeah,
Shame
it is.
on your
Yeah.
ass.
Like you're not trying to be present. Oh, and it feels so good too when we get to process out loud, and like with
Yes.
it feels really good. Yeah,
Oh man, I just love you. Thank you for holding such great
of
space. Such
course.
great space.
Too.
It makes my heart so happy. So happy.
I really feel we can do like a second part of like addiction. There's so much meat into this.
Right?
Like, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so we'll come back and we'll talk about, yeah, addiction and how it blooms.
Yes. How
Okay?
we can literally create sunflowers out of shit.
Yes.
We'll do a second one for that one.
Urge it.
Yeah. Exactly.
I love you so much, Norita.
I love you too. I hope you have a good
Okay.
Sunday. And I'll
Yeah,
see
you
you
have
this
a
week.
great Sunday. It was lovely
Okay.
to see you. Enjoy the sun. Happy Father's Day.
Likewise. Tell Manny I said happy Father's Day.
Okay, I will. I'll tell Manny.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye.